here's where we're starting off today.
Boom, baby.
Yeah, this ain't pretty.
One of the worst box office weekends in how long? Did they even make it that 100 million this weekend? I don't know.
Well, it's better than 2 weeks ago, but it's still right down there in the cellar.
When you consider the number of tentpole pieces that are in the theater this weekend, this is probably worse. I mean, maybe this is just incredible to me. Insidious: The Red Door with $32.65 million. This is against a $16 million budget. This was co-financed by Blumhouse and Sony Pictures because Sony was so desperate after the second Insidious film. They're like, we got to get all these back because they're just making too much bank. They knew early on they had to let these. They made a mistake letting these things go. $16 million for the production budget. Even if they went as crazy as they did with The Nun in 2018 and spent something like reportedly 70 to 80 million in marketing that they did on that film on a $20 million budget.
I got to add that. I can actually add that because I've seen that. And this is not as crazy as, like, let's say, The Nun or the other previous Insidious films. Mm-hmm. But the way the attachment did this delivery, there is a huge message when it comes to father-son connection and trauma. And the way it's delivered. Yeah, you know what I mean, though, right? They did the same thing that Avatar kind of did, but in a lower budget form. And that I give them props for that because it was still entertaining.
Yeah, let's start with this one here. 64 million globally, 31.4 million internationally. That's a bigger international box office for the 3-day weekend than Indiana Jones had. Okay, that's how bad things Indy are. Indiana Jones, by the way, 56 million internationally for the last 7 days.
I'm sorry, VR. I think you might have said this, but what's the Insidious budget again?
16 million.
Okay.
1-6. And it was co-financed by Sony. And look, even if this movie made $0 in the theater, what does Sony have? A big old freaking deal with Netflix. Netflix basically paid for this movie. I mean, Netflix is probably going to give Sony and Blumhouse probably $40-50 million to buy this movie to put it on Netflix. That's part of that big $1 billion deal.
Yeah, and they're calling it not the best one in the series, but you know, it's kicking butt, and it's
a fifth movie in a series, and it's still making this much. Psh.
Yeah,
Paulie, it was directed by the actor, right? Patrick Wilson.
Patrick Wilson. Yeah.
To what Paulie is saying, also with that, it even if that's so, what we were saying for the last few weeks is that cheesy B kind of film we were all hoping for that needs to come back. This is even the precedent. Like, even if it's not better than the other four, it's still doing better.
Right. And that's my takeaway from the box office the last couple of weeks, VR, is you're seeing the dollars going around to a lot of different movies.
Yeah. Well, we also need to remember horror is one of the most consistent things in film.
Unless you're
but it's not just horror right now. You know, it's
my point is though, like the only films that have really made any money this year, most of them have been horror films, like Megan, Scream.
Yeah,
Mario.
I'm just going off of what I'm seeing in the top 10 and the trend happening now.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because the big movies were such flops. You're in. It's not a lot. It's not a lot. I know it's not, but you're seeing movies kind of legging out a couple bucks here and there. Whether it's Insidious, Sound of Freedom, No Hard Feelings, Joyride. I hear Joyride hilarious, and it's not superhero movies. This is great news.
Well, the thing about this that makes it easy is that these movies are incredibly low risk. I mean, when you're talking about 10, 15, $20 million for these films. Now, the one that's out there that
and horror has never gone out of style either. That's my point.
No, it hasn't. But I mean, if we look at here, let's go down since we brought this up. No Hard Feelings, right? Now, this isn't doing that great in the box office, but here's the deal. They spent $45 million to do this one, which is way ridiculous. And I think a lot of that had to do with Jennifer Lawrence, obviously. However, again, if it was any other or virtually any other studio, I'd say this would have been a miss. But again, this is Sony. This is Netflix's footing the bill for this. So, in other words, if I'm Netflix and I'm like, man, I'd love to get a Jennifer Lawrence rom-com, but she's never going to do a movie just for Netflix. She's going to want to go in the theater. Get Sony to make the picture, pay Sony for it. After it's in theaters, this is kind of one of these. This is the more traditional approach, right, to theatrical and post-theatrical distribution.
And it's still making a couple bucks. And unlike Disney, like you said, Sony had the deal with Netflix. Disney flubbed up yet again with Flaming Hot, which was the biggest streaming movie for weeks, still is up in the top 10 for Disney Plus. Didn't give it a theatrical release. You know, so again, kudos to Sony.
Polly
Give
also
you guys an idea of how badly things are going for Disney in terms of Insidious beating Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny. Folks, get ready for this number, okay? Knowing what we know about the Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny budget, remember that here on the Valiant Renegade channel, we've been saying it was $332 million. We've been saying that for, 6 months. The trades came out later and essentially corroborated that finally, admitting that it's above $300 million. They're saying it's 329. We'll split the difference, right? $3 million difference. We now know that they had to go up higher because of reshoots that James Mangold decided to deceive a bit on, we think. So, given all of that, here's how much more Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny cost versus Insidious: The Red Door, which takes the #1 spot. Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny, 22 times approximately. 22 times more to produce than Insidious. And it was beaten by that film. It's incredible.
Can I ask a question to this? Do you think it's that we're also at the point when it comes to the normal audiences that now anything that has the Disney tag on it automatically gets kind of shunned and not looked at anymore, and anything that doesn't seems like a retrospective to go check out first because it might be something different than what Disney's been throwing out lately when it comes to their political stance or their socio-political stance?
I'd say yes and no if you're asking me.
I'm asking everyone.
I think the successes of Disney are that are Disney owned aren't because of their doing. It's because they completely either mismarketed, and yet it still found an audience. Encanto, Flaming Hot, in VR, Encanto is it's still
in the Nielsen charts. You're right.
It's still in the Nielsen charts. It's the #1 movie last year for Disney Plus.
Yep.
No.
Well, and look at the situation with Sound
No
of Freedom.
thanks to Disney. So that's my answer there.
I mean, even though a lot of the critics and stuff are misquoting this movie, saying or misrepresenting this movie, saying it's a Christian-based film and made blah, 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 blah. No. This movie was made by 20th Century Fox Studios 5 years ago. Yep. Disney sat on it for 5 years. And as Jim Caviezel says in the end of the movie, they went through every obstacle they could to try and stop this movie from coming out. And at the end of the day, when it finally,
them in per theater.
Yeah, and I say irony of ironies is now it's beating them on the per theater average. It's probably as far as the movie goes itself, it's probably the one that has the best percentage this weekend as far as playing per theater average and all that business.
Oh yeah.
I mean, maybe Insidious beat a little bit.
Well, look, it's right there. I mean, it's 61.72.
Insidious also has a hell of a lot more theaters too. Yeah.
Well, it's close. I mean, Insidious, they've only got about 100 or 200 more theaters, but I mean, it's got it. Insidious didn't come out on a Tuesday, right? So Sound of Freedom has racked up a decent little bit here in a surprise. So let's pull up.
Well, and that's the thing is Disney could have dumped this movie on Hulu 5 years ago and buried it. Nobody would ever saw it. It wouldn't even be a problem right now.
Yep.
The fact of the matter is the subject matter between these two films that are on top right now, whether Sound of Freedom or Insidious, is quite remarkable because one is a horror film franchise, while the other one is actually talking about a real world scenario that has been going on. It's crazy. No, I'm going to say this honestly.
No.
It shows that they're both powerful in their own way.
I wasn't trying to downplay it. I was just saying horror is always,
it's a
steady, earner. This is a whole nother situation. This is, and they can't deny it anymore. They're starting to pay attention to it. They're starting to change their tune a little bit about it. I'm sure, as you've seen over the last few days, just about every major media outlet's tried to come after this thing, calling it some kind of conspiracy or it's bullshit. Yeah. Pardon my French, but it is a bunch of crap. And the other side of it too, where they're all right, I'll hold on to it then.
Sorry, its timing is beautiful. Its timing is beautiful because of the Nick Merck situation and what has been going on in the previous. And I'll stop right now. I'm sorry, I'm getting.
No, you're fine. I
just let's segue to what VR wants to talk about next, though. We need to give a big congratulations to Elemental. It's topped $100 million.
That and Flash did this week. Yeah, congratulations, you guys.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing.
You guys are being sarcastic.
Big milestones. Big milestone.
Ryan,
congratulations.
Yeah, I mean Elemental did leg out a little bit better than a lot of people expected.
Legging out a couple bucks,
but it's not saving its butt. Let's put it that way.
It is already this length into its domestic run. It is a quarter of the way to making profitability, baby. Give it another couple years, it just might do it.
Sounds like you're describing almost like horseshoes or hand grenades. I don't think that works.
What is this trend telling you, even in this top 10, with Insidious beating out Indiana Jones, Elemental, Spider-Man still in the top 5?
Paulie, if you bought a car, and you wanted to go race with it, and some guy pulled up to you and just smoked you, and his car cost 1/22nd of the amount that yours did, you're going to go have a talk with the mechanics. You think that's right?
Yeah. As far as what I paid for, yeah.
If somebody is smoking you on the streets with a vehicle that's 1/20th of the cost of what you paid, you got a problem. Disney has a problem. They got a big problem.
You look at this Sound of Freedom here since Tuesday has racked up a little over $40 million. I think this thing is, you want to see legs, I think this thing will have a decent set of legs on it. But what's noteworthy is not just that, look at how close it is. This is the second weekend of Indiana Jones. This isn't the third weekend, the fourth, fifth weekend. This is the second. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Let me put it this way. We're not even at 250 million yet. It's been out 10 days, and that's global. As I said in the video earlier today that I put out, I said $250 million for this film would have been the minimum, the bare minimum hoped for by Disney in the opening 3-day window. That's the reality of it. This movie should have done 250 plus in the first 3 days without blinking. We're now 10 days in. It's still not at that marker. And the first weekend of 55 million is what this movie should have done in the second weekend.
And it's over. This was it. This was its last chance.
Yeah.
That's it. Because I made my little prediction, VR, that I think I'm going to stick with it. I don't see this passing 290 million. We'll see.
290?
I think
it hits 350. That's where I think
it's only 30 million,
you keep
40
saying
million
that,
away.
W.
Well,
they're
going to take a cue from
away.
They're going to take a cue from Sound of Freedom. They're going to start pushing out some real Applebee's coupons you haven't seen the likes of which in the history of cinema.
Well, if they were smart, they would have been Burger King,
But that could happen.
The Blue Beetle thing. Oh man, we talked about that. That was
but
so
no,
weird.
Mission Impossible is coming, and that's really is the final coffin, the nail on the coffin there for Indiana.
Yep, indeed. But here we are with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. We're just shy of 250 now. I think this thing will probably add, before it completely exits the theaters, it's going to be in there for another several weeks. At least another 4 weeks at this point. It should be able to add another 100 million. Slowly but surely, it'll probably just roll in. I think 350 is a reasonable figure. In fact, when I did a video a couple of days ago talking about how Disney has no control of their budgets, I even gave some extreme deference to Indiana Jones and Disney and said it winds up at 400 million globally. Now I don't think it's going to get there. I think it's probably going to be more like 350. But it's close enough now to where, great. They'll get to brag that they crossed $250 million globally after 11 days.
I don't think they're going to be doing any bragging anytime soon. No, hey, and by the way, have you noticed we have not heard anything at all, zero, nada, zilch about The Little Mermaid in weeks now, because there is nothing there for them to celebrate either, and they know it. So I think this gets a similar treatment.